Good morning, Facebook family and friends. Hope y'all are doing well. Got another Bible study for you, and I'm just going to tell y'all this one really just hit me so strongly. I mean, really made me question looking at my Christian life as to, am I really being who God wants me to be? You know, am I just keeping my eyes open for God? Am I seeing who He wants me to see when He wants me to see Him? Am I reaching people? Am I doing what I need to do for the Lord? So the title of this lesson is, do you want to be a part of someone's miracle? Do you want to be a part of someone's testimony? Do you want to be a part of their story? So there's a show on YouTube called Is God Active? And it tells story after story about miracles where God has showed up, for people at the very last moment or in a person's just darkest hour, their scariest times. But God let a miracle happen, or let someone show up, let something happen in that right when it needed to happen. And so my question is, will you be involved in someone's miracle? Let me explain that a little bit further. So I could probably ask each one of you to just put in the comments at least one miracle that you've experienced in your life that you absolutely knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was God, and that God had intervened, and God had sent the right person at the right time, or God showed up at the right time. And every single person, I'll guarantee you, could tell me plenty of stories. But you know what? In most of those cases, it took someone listening to God when God said for them to do it. They didn't delay. They didn't wait. They didn't question it. Or maybe they questioned it, but it was very briefly. And then they did what God told them to do. And now they are a part of someone's story. They're a part of someone's miracle, somebody's testimony, part of somebody's reason to keep going as a Christian, or just keep going in life in general, as you'll see in some of the stories that I'm going to tell you today. I'm going to tell you some stories about some miracles that had happened and that I learned about even on this channel, and from my own life and from different people, and where we knew without a shadow of a doubt that God had showed up and God had performed a miracle. So let me read this. So you never know when you do what God says, when God says it. You never know that you could even possibly save a person's life. It could even go that far. God sees what we don't see, and He hears the prayers of each of us. We are His servants, and we must be willing to do what God asks us to do. But Satan has us already, just by us being on our phones all the time when we are out in public. We go to the grocery store and we have so much on our minds, or we're so angry about the prices, that we don't even see that single mom standing there in tears because she's trying to decide what one item or two items she's going to buy to try to feed her family, because social services says that they make $1 too much. And you might think that that is a joke, or that is just overextending this, but it absolutely isn't. I actually know a person who was told that they made $1 too much, and you couldn't move the numbers around or anything for that $1 for a family to get some help. And that is the absolute truth. I know this to be a fact. So, but we don't see the people around us who are hurting because we don't have our eyes open. We have our eyes on our phones, on the social media, the videos. We're no longer looking to see what God wants us to see, or to be involved in what God wants us to be involved in. Like we go to the doctor and we don't see that discouraged person sitting across the room from us because we are watching videos on our phones, or answering text, or on Facebook. We have to open our eyes and be the servants that God has us to be. We have to pray and say, God, open my eyes. Let me see the people that you want me to be a part of their miracle, because I sure want them to be looking out when I need a miracle. I want to be listening to God. I want them to be listening to God. I want to share some miracle stories with you that will open your eyes to how sometimes the most simple act can make a lifelong difference in someone's life. We live a very busy life, and it's so easy to be wrapped up in our problems and our lives that we don't see others anymore. Do you want to be someone's miracle? Before I share the miracle stories, though, I just want to give you a few scriptures, about this subject. 1 Corinthians 13:1 says, Though I speak with the tongues of men and of the angels and have not charity, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. This verse hit me hard because it means that you can know how to talk the talk as a Christian. You can know how to walk the walk. You can know how to sound good as a Christian, look good as a Christian. But if you don't have compassion in your heart or have a desire in your heart that God wants you to have, then you're just making noise. You're just making noise when you talk that will have no impact on a person's heart and soul. So first, we need to ask God to help us to not be so distracted that we don't see others, and to give us a loving, compassionate heart in order to see others' pain. Luke 33 says, And if ye do good to them which do good to you, what thank have ye? For sinners also do even the same. We have to be willing to help strangers. We are trying to win the lost. Speak to people that you don't normally speak to. You may finally be a good example of a Christian. You may help to renew their faith in God and in good people. Luke 6:38. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom, for the same measure shall you meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. You can't outgive God is basically what that means. But the more you give of your money, yourself, your service, your talents, your time, God will give that back more than you can ever expect. Like tithing, this is not everybody likes the subject, but tithing is when you're already struggling with money, you can't see how you can possibly give away 10% of it. But God makes all things work together that didn't work before. He makes money stretch further. He makes your gas go further. Your groceries last longer. He makes things work. And he blesses you in so many ways, more than you were ever blessed before. When you finally let go of that one last thing that's hard to let go of, is letting God help with your money and be in control and tell you, what to do with it, and God will bless it. My husband and I have been tithing now for at least 30 years. And I'm going to tell you that God has blessed us in more ways than we could ever imagine. And when we first started tithing, we were struggling. 3 kids, we had no money, just a financial mess. And the pastor preached on tithing one day, and we looked at each other, and after church we talked about it and said, you know what, we're making a mess of it right now. Why don't we just give it a try? If it doesn't work, then we stop giving it. And I'm going to tell you, within 1 week, God showed us a miracle. Our son, 30 years ago, our son needed glasses, and at that time they were like $500 a pair. And he needed glasses, and we did not have the money to get it. And I prayed, and I said, well, okay, Lord, we started tithing, Lord, and we need help, but I said, well, nobody owes us anything. There's nowhere this money could come from. So I don't know where it's going to come from, Lord, but we're going to trust you. Go to the mailbox that very day. There's a check for $500 and some, and from an insurance company saying you overpaid 5 years ago, or you've overpaid over a course of so many years, and so they gave us the refund. But that was God. That was God showing you trust me, and I'm going to take care of you. And He has ever since. So, and I'm just saying that to help you. Everybody has to make their own decisions concerning their money, but I'm telling you from our own experience that you can't outgive God. Okay? So, and also another thing that happened is right after we started tithing, I had got a promotion at work, like the biggest promotion I had ever had, making the best money I'd ever made in my life. And we knew. And then my husband had got a promotion after that. I mean, we knew. We just knew that God was taking care of us, and that it was because we had finally committed our money to Him. So, but y'all can chew on that and decide what you want to do. I'm just telling you, if you want to truly be blessed, then do that. Okay? You can't outgive God. So many times, though, when God tells us to call someone, I'm getting back to our miracles now in just a minute. So many times when God tells us to call someone, text someone, send a card, we put it off. But what if they needed you right now? Listen to these miracles, and you'll see just how important it is, and sometimes it can even mean life or death. Okay, so here's one of the stories that was on Is God Active today. There was an 80-year-old nurse who had been a nurse for 45 years, and she and her husband had gotten married young and had children right away. They lived in Canada, a very, very cold place. The husband was a college student, and the wife wasn't in college yet, but they ran out of money, and they already had a daughter. So they decided both of them would go and work at the local lumber yard to make extra money. While there, the husband had a pile of lumber to fall on his hand, and it broke his hand, which caused him to not be able to work for a while. So they decided to move back to the town where his parents lived, which at that time was across country. And so they go there to try to get help. They even went to the bank there and tried to borrow money, but couldn't. But the banker says to him, "Young man, why are you not in college?" Still, he said, "Why are you not in college still?" And he explained that all the things that had happened with their money, about his hand and everything. And this banker says, this is what I'm going to do for you. He said, if you'll go down to the University of Michigan, I will pay for your tuition. And when you get out of college and get a job, then you can pay me back. So he packed up his wife and his child, and they traveled to Michigan. Well, they had only $35 in their pocket. So they slept in the car in the parking lot of the University of Michigan. Well, and they prayed that night. They're like, Lord, okay, we're here, but now what? 6:30 the next morning, this woman knocks on the car window and says, "What are you doing here?" And they explain that they have come there to go to college. The woman sees a pregnant wife and a crying baby and says, "Wait here. I'm going to help you." This woman could have went on her way. She could have said, "It's not my business." But she didn't. She listened to that little voice inside that said, "Go check on these people." And God spoke to her heart and told her to help. Turns out she is the secretary to the vice president of the university. She comes back and says, "Follow me." She has worked out student housing for them and furniture for the home and bought groceries for them to start out. But what about food after that? So the woman prays and she says, "God, what are we going to do now?" The next day, the neighbor comes over and introduces herself and asks the wife if she knows how to cook. She says, yes. And she says, well, I hate cooking. She said, so I'll make a deal with you. If you'll cook the meals for your family and mine every evening, I'll buy all the groceries for both households. That's God. Later on, a year or two later, one night, they were back in a place where they didn't have enough food. I guess the neighbor had moved on at that point. But it was so bad that the children had cried themselves to sleep, and they were hungry. And the couple dropped down to their knees beside their bed, and they prayed and said, Lord, our kids are starving. We're hungry. We don't have any more. We don't have the money. And while they were praying, they heard a noise outside their house. And they walk outside, and the whole porch is covered in bags of groceries. Now, this is at night. But if you think about it, somebody had to listen to the voice of God. To go get groceries and actually take them to a person's house overnight. And the woman told the story and said, these weren't just the stuff you don't want. She said these were groceries as if she had went and picked out the finest things. And that the whole porch, and she even told the size of the porch, was covered in groceries. That's God. In the midst of their prayer, God sent somebody, but somebody had to listen. Now, that person who listened to God, though they still don't know who that was, are a part of their miracle. They are a part of their testimony and their story. Will you be a part of someone's miracle? Will you listen to God? Story number 2. A 25-year-old young man became addicted to drugs after being abused, and after 10 years of addiction, he hit rock bottom, and he took the day off that day purposely to take his own life. But before he did, he prayed one more time, and he said, Lord, if you don't do something for me right now, this is it. I can't live this way anymore. And just before he was about to do it, the phone rings. And it is the local university. And they said, we want you to come here and be a student and enter into our social work program completely paid for. He didn't even apply for college. And they said, can you start right away? He knew that this was God saying, I have a plan for your life. He's a social worker now, working with addicted teens. He says that he wouldn't take back the years of addiction, though, because now he is doing what he knows God wanted him to do, but he couldn't do it fully had he not experienced what the teens actually go through. What if the person from the university that made that call that day had gotten busy and didn't make that call exactly when God said to do it? Will you be someone's miracle? Story number 3. This is the milk story. It's actually been around for years. I've actually heard this several times. So there's a man driving home, and he's so tired, he just wants to get home when he feels God telling him to stop and buy a gallon of milk. He immediately doesn't want to do that, and immediately he does what most of us do, and he starts making excuses. He says, I don't need milk. I already have some. Or I can just buy it tomorrow. God says, stop and buy a gallon of milk. And God just will not let up on him. He just gets the feeling is so strong that he finally stops and buys the milk. Well, he starts driving home, not knowing why God told him to buy it or what he's supposed to do with it. But as he heads home, he passes a house, and God says, stop and go to the door and give them the gallon of milk. Well, this is way too far out of his comfort zone. You want me to stop at a stranger's house, knock on the door, and say, I have a gallon of milk for you? God says yes. So he stopped at the house and he knocked on the door, and a woman comes to the door, and he could see that she had been crying, and he hears the baby crying. So he says, ma'am, God told me to stop and buy this milk and bring it to you. He said, I know it sounds crazy, but God just wouldn't let up on me until I did it. The single mom burst into tears and says, sir, you don't understand. I just prayed and said, God, if I don't get some milk for my baby, then he will probably die tonight, and then I will too. This man is stunned. They are both stunned. They are both crying because they know that a miracle has just happened. The story goes on to say that he continues to check on her. They actually start dating and end up married. If he had not listened to God's voice and bought the milk and stopped at the stranger's house, none of those things would have happened. We never know when we listen to God what all it will affect. Some things we may not see the full effect until we get to heaven. But listen to God no matter what. Story number 4. Just a little bit more, y'all. A missionary pastor in Ecuador is walking into his church, and a gang came up and said, "I'll watch your van for you," meaning, pay me and nothing will happen to your van. The pastor points up to heaven and says, "I have someone watching over my van that is the greatest protector of all." This just angered the gang members. So they ended up just stealing a phone from one of the church members. And as they walked in, they told the pastor, and he went out to confront them. They immediately pull a gun and put it to his head. The church people all began to pray for God's protection, and the gang member pulled the trigger twice, but the gun wouldn't go off. The pastor asked God what to do, and God said, "Just say nothing's going to happen here today and walk away." He did this, and the gang members walked away. Later that day, unfortunately, they robbed someone else, and that trigger did go off. But what if the church people hadn't immediately prayed? Sometimes we're just called to pray for someone immediately. You never know why a person needs immediate prayer. Next story. A young Christian woman was going to school in Germany, and she had a dream. She had had a dream, and in that dream, Satan told her that he saw how she was trying to live for God, and that she wasn't worthy of it, and that she would never amount to anything. He also said, "And by the way, I'm going to kill you." She had a flight planned for a few days later, and she thought that Satan may use that to try to kill her, and she was very afraid. So she went to the doctor. They gave her an anxiety medication. She took it, and it helped with the flight, but afterward, it had a very adverse effect on her heart. She video called her mom and tried to tell her mom how she was feeling. She didn't know it, but her words were slurred and she looked terrible. Her mom knew that her daughter was in danger. Her mom was able to just get a hold of a lawyer. She just was finding a number and dialing, and ended up to be a lawyer. And she told him about her daughter and where her daughter was. And turns out that he just happened to have a best friend that was a doctor and that spoke English. And so the doctor agreed to go to the hotel where the daughter was and check on her. And she was so sick, she was immediately taken to the hospital and put in ICU. The doctor was the only one that could speak English. What are the chances that she gets a hold to this lawyer who just happens to have a best friend who's a doctor, who just happens to be the only one in that area who speaks English? What are the chances of that? It's God. That's what I say. God placed the correct people in the perfect places at the perfect times to save this girl's life. God already knew this was going to happen, and already had the right people who were willing to do the right thing. Will you be someone's miracle? You know, when Phyllis and I, my sister, went to the beach recently, we were coming in one evening, from dinner and shopping, and we were coming in one evening, and it just seemed like a very scary night. I mean, it was like no one on the streets, and you just felt evil. That's the only way I can explain it. And this particular hotel it has very limited parking right at the hotel. Most of the parking is 2 and 3 streets over. And we did not want, the way it was feeling, to have to park 2 or 3 streets over from this hotel. And we prayed and said, "God, please just get us in the building safely." And so we come around the corner, and there comes the security guard out. And so we stopped and asked him, did he know of any parking that we didn't know of that might be a little safer? And he said, well, I don't even work here. I just have a friend that works here, but you know what? I'll help you. And he literally walked through the parking lots and found us a spot, led us to that space, waited for us to get out, and then walked with us to where we could get back in the hotel safely that night. To me, he was our miracle. He didn't have to be that nice. He didn't have to go so far as to walk out there and find us a space and walk with us and make sure we got in the building safely. Most people these days won't go that far to help you. So he was our miracle that night. And sometimes, it's not just people that we need, but sometimes it's just God that you need for a miracle to happen. Years ago, my daughter-in-law and I were at the beach again, and we had been to the grocery store, and it was dark outside, and we were walking back into the room, and we had actually already got into the hallway of the hotel, and these two men came up on us, and I mean, they came up behind us, and they just like got so close up on you, you literally could feel them breathing on your neck. And they were like, "What are you doing?" You just knew that, we were really scared that we were going to get hurt. And my daughter-in-law, who she kept like a little pocket knife or something with her all the time, and she just reached down in her pocketbook, and this knife is open, which she doesn't leave open. And she reaches down, pulls it out, it's already open, and just kind of puts it near the man's side. And she didn't try to hurt him or nothing. She just got it out to where he actually saw it. And he tells his friend, "Come on, we've got to go." And his friend's like, "We're not done." And he says, "Come on, we have to go." And they left us. Now, we know that was a miracle. We know because she certainly doesn't leave a knife open in her pocketbook. And usually it's tucked down in this little pocket or something. And no, her hand went straight to it. No searching for it. Straight to it, and it was already open. Nobody had to get hurt, but it kept us safe. We know that was God. So the question is, will you be that for somebody? Will you be somebody's miracle? Satan has us scared because there's so much bad in this world. If we feel that God is telling us to do something, then we need to pray for safety and do it. You just might be someone's miracle. Any of us could be that person who is in the right place at the right time if we are willing. Will you be someone's miracle? Now, I do understand there's some things, especially with, being a woman, there's just some things that's just not safe for us to do. And, that you do need to have someone with you, to do these things. But there's a lot that we can do. The watching out for other people, looking at people's faces to see, is this person discouraged? Listen to people when they talk. So many times we got so much on our mind. Somebody can be talking to us and we're like, yeah, And you don't half remember what they said because you weren't really listening. If we ever want to be the light of this world that God wants us to be, if we ever want to reach people like we say we want to reach them, then we're going to have to open our hearts, open our eyes, and pray for God to show us who He wants us to see, when He wants us to see Him, and be willing to be someone's miracle. I hope this was a help for you. I'd love to hear any miracle stories that you do have if you want to put them in the comments. But anyway, thank you all for listening. Have a blessed day.